There were thousands of bees all swarming around my head. It was thick like a cloud. I could hardly see through them, there were that many. And as I watched them, this massive group of insects slowly move away from me down across a field and into a woodland, I became very intrigued. And I decided at that moment that one day I'm gonna become a beekeeper and I'm gonna make some honey. And a few months later, I did just that. And now I'm a beekeeper on my quest to make some honey. Where do you start with a hobby like beekeeping? There's one thing keeping a pet animal. There's another thing keeping 20 to 60,000 little insects in a box in your garden. I was very confused. I didn't know what to do, and I searched, how do I keep bees? And slowly but surely I worked through YouTube's video content on beekeeping, and I also read some books and learned a bit, and slowly the world of beekeeping became smaller, and I learned a little bit by little bit, and I became slowly more knowledgeable, and I felt like, you know, one day I can see this becoming a reality.
Package in the post. Ooh, the bee manual. The learning process begins.
One of the biggest steps that helped me start beekeeping was joining the local bee club. That's right, there's a local club for beekeepers. You can join them and be part of this community of odd human beings who are obsessed with bees. And it allowed me to get in contact with loads of other local beekeepers who live near where I do. So that was really useful. I went on the club's Facebook page and I introduced myself. I said, my name's Alex. I haven't kept bees before, but I really want to. If anyone can give me any advice or help, then it would be much appreciated. I had one lady who commented and said, oh, I've got an old beehive. You can have it if you want to get started. And then I had another guy get in contact saying that he actually had some bees that he could give me. I was being given a beehive. I was being given flipping colony of bees. I couldn't say no. And so my beekeeping journey began just there. I've just hopped in the car and I'm on my way to a fellow beekeeper's house who has very kindly offered me the parts required to set up my first ever beehive.
Right then, let's see what we've got.
Because the beehive I was given had previously been used by another colony of bees, there was a chance that there could be some diseases. So I got a blowtorch and basically went over the whole thing, just burning everything off, so that there was no chance that any diseases would be able to get into my new colony when they were brought in. It was time to set up the beehive. First goes down the floor. It's like the floor of your house. And it has like an open mesh floor, which means that ventilation can get through, but unwanted pests can't actually go up and up into the hive. Next goes on the brood box. This is basically where all the baby bees are raised. So the queen will be laying all the eggs in this section. The main nest of bees will be in the brood box area. There's a bee on my camera. I think it's not happy with it. Please don't get mad and sting me. Within this brood box goes some frames. Now frames are basically the man-made equivalent to what the bees would naturally build. Say if they were living in a hole in a tree, they would build these frames of wax that they use to create their cells, to lay eggs in, to store honey, to live basically. And the frames are what us beekeepers give to the bees to give them like a head start. I'm in the car again and I'm on my way to my local beekeeping supply store, and I've got to pick up a few bits of equipment. Just picked up the stuff from Payne's Bee Farm. Anyway, I'll get home and set everything up. I got my frames from a local bee shop and I spent a good few hours assembling them. Basically, they were a lot cheaper if I got them flat packed rather than ready-made. So I got a hammer, got some screws, and I spent a few hours putting frames together. Something I've learned after doing this for the last hour is that putting the wax in is the hardest part. And slowly ease it in. It feels so nice to hold. Right, here we go. Got another 9-10 frames to make. Don't know whether I'm looking forward to it or whether I'm a bit nervous about actually holding these full of bees. It will sure be an experience. And there we go, that's frame making done for the day. And here we have frames with foundation in, ready to put in the hive. And I've got what's called a queen excluder. Now this goes on top of the brood box, but it's only really necessary, I suppose, when you've got a honey super on top, so a honey box, and that stops the queen coming up and laying her eggs in the honey. And the queen can't get through these holes, but the worker bees can. And then on top of that goes something called a crown board. A crown board is basically a lid, but it actually has a little hole in. Now this is to allow you to put a feeder on top where the bees can come up and feed. You'll see that a bit later on. But on top of the crown board then goes the actual roof, like a proper waterproof roof. This is what keeps the elements out and stops anything from getting in, like rain or animals or stuff like that. I have got to redo that roof and put an extra waterproofing on top because, yeah, this one's really falling apart, but I shall do that before the bees come. Beehive pretty much ready. There we go, got the bee suit. Got this sort of head thing which makes me look like I'm doing fencing. Right, let's stop messing about and go get the bees. I don't care about beekeeping, I'm all about the smoker burning. How cool is that? So I'm in the garden, I'm just checking that everything is ready for the bees to come in. Yeah, everything's starting to feel a lot more real. Until now I've just felt really confident and sure that this is a really good idea and a fun thing to do. But now the idea of 20,000 insects trying to sting me flying around my head is starting to not sound so good. My negative thoughts are kicking in, that's for sure. I'm pretty nervous. Right, it is just past 7 o'clock in the evening. It's starting to get dark now, which means the bees will be starting to go to bed. They'll be going back to the hive where they are at the moment. The guy who I'm collecting them off will probably lock them up, and then I'm going to go and get them, bring them all back here and relocate them in the garden. I'm nervous, I'm really, really nervous. Well, this will be the first time I've actually had a pet since my pet rabbit that probably passed away maybe 4 or 5 years ago now. I'm on my way to get bees. That was one hectic drive through Brighton. Saw a motorbike hit into a normal bike, and saw some guys having a fight, and saw some drunk ladies, and it all happens down in Brighton, that's for sure.
Okay, so basically you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames in there. Yes.
There we go.
All I would say to you is enjoy. Have you got some antihistamine cream?
I've got flipping thousands of bees in my car. Right, let's get home safely. I brought the bees back to my house, took them out my car, brought them into the back garden and plonked them on the stand I had made. So basically it was getting late and I couldn't see anything, and so I waited until the following day before I actually transferred them into the hive. Well, I slept really badly last night, thinking about the old bees in the garden. I'm busy later on today, so I need to get to work and get them out of the transport box into the full-size hive. There we go. I don't want to get stung, you see, so I'm doing all necessary precautions to avoid it. I've tucked my jumper into my trousers
trousers into my socks. Oh, I think I've done that so tight it's not going to let any blood through my hand.
So I took the frames one by one out of the transport box into the hive until I had all of them in the hive.
Frame 1 in place. Oh my god, look at that. There's the queen, there's the queen, there's the queen. Do you see the queen? It's got a white dot on its head. You see they've built the comb completely off where the frame is, which isn't good because it'll make it really hard to get out of the box in the future.
And that was the process of getting the bees from one person to me. And now I had bees in my garden. Crazy. I can't believe it.
Well, currently one frame to go, but we've had a bit of a problem because there's just so much of this comb which they've built. Well, I kind of don't want it. I just took off a massive piece because if they have it coming like right off in this bit here, then the frames can't go together properly and it makes it hard to inspect. And lastly goes in this board. There we go, we've got the 5 frames in there of the bees that Stephen gave me yesterday. They're in safely. I know the queen's in there. She was on that frame, I think. First morning beekeeping.
I was really surprised by how calm the bees were. Like in my head, I was thinking, these bees are gonna be mad. I've just taken them in the car, put them in a new place that they're not familiar with, and I thought they were just gonna go crazy at me and sting me. But no, they were super calm, really chilled out, and I had a brilliant experience actually of my first day beekeeping. It was very chilled out and a lot less stressful than I first thought it would be.
Oh, he's slurping up all the honey that probably is on my hand from whilst I was trying to get that comb off. So I've got the crown board on, and on top of that I need to put a feeder just to give them a helping hand. Whoa, I need to take a breather. My heart has been racing for the last 15 minutes whilst putting the bees in the hive. But they're in there, the roof is on, they've got some food. That was exciting though. Bees are awesome, honestly. They're one of the coolest animals. Goodbye, my new friends. See you soon.
So how does a honeybee colony even work? Well, honeybees work kind of differently to many other animals in that they are known as a superorganism. They need to work and function as a whole rather than individually. You need the queen, you need the worker bees, and you need the drones, which are the male bees. You need them all to work together in order for them to be successful and reproduce and create more colonies in the future. So you got the queen. She has the main aim and goal and job of laying eggs. Then you've got the worker. The worker, as it's very well named, simply works very hard, collecting pollen and collecting nectar to bring food back to the colony and supply all the other bees with food to eat. The worker also does lots of hard-working jobs within the hive as well, such as cleaning out things, cleaning out the cells, and looking after the queen as well. Then you've got the drone. The drone is the male bee. Very important to have a male bee within a colony because this bee is what mates with the queens and means that you can have more bees. Quick update from the garden, and the bees are looking happy actually. Not really sure how you know if a bee is happy, but they've been very busy on this sunny late summer's day. They've been out foraging quite a lot, and I'm just having a nice little watch of them. What a way to spend a Sunday afternoon, eh? Right then, bees. Give you some smoke.
Let's see how you've been doing. Looks like they've been eating some of the food. Oh wow, they've nearly had all of it. Well, looking inside the feeder, they're having a good munch. Quite a few ants in there.
On a frame inside a beehive, you have many hexagonal cells, and these cells are used by the bees in many different ways. Firstly, the bees can use them to store food in, so they would store nectar, which in turn would turn into honey. They also use the cells to store pollen, which is another source of food, high in protein, so that they can feed that to the baby bees, which need lots of protein. The cells are then also used for actually raising the young. So the queen will lay eggs inside the cells, and then the bees develop inside those cells, and then the bees emerge and come out and live in the hive. So the cells are incredibly important and have many different uses.
On that frame we got lots of stores at the top. And the smoke actually really helps get them away from the top of the frames and down looking for their honey. Whoa, this one's full of bees. There's the queen. One last frame to check. Honey, stores. They're just drawing out the comb on that side. So you see all of that? That's all stores. That'll be the honey or the sugar syrup that I'm feeding them, and they've sealed it up ready for winter. There's brood at all stages, which means the queen is alive. I actually saw the queen. They're laying. There's quite a few bit more honey stores. It looks okay, I think.
So I got my bees at the end of summer. It was, I think, end of August. And so this is sort of the end of the beekeeping season. And we were going into autumn. And there's a number of things you need to think about when you're going through autumn and into winter time, because bees primarily, they are most active and they are doing all their work in the summer and when it's warm, when there's flowers that they can forage pollen and nectar from. And so they need to prepare for the winter. And as a beekeeper, you need to give them a helping hand and make sure that they are ready to go through maybe a 6-month period without being able to find many flowers and food to eat. So there's a number of jobs I had to do. Firstly, I had to make sure they had enough food. Because my colony of bees were quite small, I received them towards the end of the season. They hadn't been able to spend much time foraging. They didn't have many stores of food available to them. I had to feed them. And I fed them with a mix of water and sugar. It's very simple. I just got some sugar, put it in a saucepan, and then added some water to it, mixed it up, made sure it was all dissolved, and then I put it inside a feeder, which was then placed inside the hive. It was placed on top of the crown board, and there's a hole in the crown board, so the bees can go up through that hole and then feed on what is called the sugar syrup. The bees will take this sugar syrup down into their hive and then store it in the cells, so that then they can use it later on, like throughout the winter when they need it. Also, going into autumn and winter, I needed to check whether my bees were healthy. And this means basically checking for diseases, checking that the bees are okay and happy and healthy. Because I'm a very new beekeeper, I found being able to identify what a healthy hive looks like, I found that very hard. From my eyes, I looked at them and I saw that they were eating the food I was giving them. They looked healthy. They didn't show any definite signs of illness, which is good. But there was one thing I did have to check for. What is considered the biggest threat to honeybees, and that is something called the Varroa destructor mite. Now it sounds pretty scary. It's a little mite which lives on bees as a parasite, and I believe it sucks the blood out of bees. And if there are lots of them in a hive, then they can basically destroy the whole colony and all the bees die. This sounds pretty bad, but it's very common for bees to have this Varroa destructor mite. And so I had to check my ones and see if they had them. But how on earth are you supposed to see whether your bees have this tiny little microscopic mite on them? Well, I talked to the local bee club and they suggested I do something called a Varroa mite check. And this basically involved making a square board of wood.
My cutting skills aren't too good. Oh yeah. There is my square bit of wood. Oh boy, that's satisfying. That's so cool. Oh, I feel so good about myself. I made a bit of wood that fits in the correct place. I also never ever thought I would be making a mite trap. It's one of the most peculiar things to be doing. But it's all for the bees. I want them to survive the winter. I painted the board white, so if any mites dropped down onto it, they would show up better. Then I also covered it in Vaseline to make the mites stick to the board. I have just slid in the white board that I painted underneath the hive. In a few days, I'm gonna have to pull that out, count how many mites I find, if there's any there, and depending on that number, I will have to treat the bees with some sort of treatment so that the Varroa mite doesn't take over the colony and kill them all.
5 days later, and I took out the board and I took it into some good light, used a little magnifying glass and looked very carefully, and I only found, I think, 2 mites. And now this is considered to be quite low for that time of year. And I talked to some other beekeepers and they said, yep, you don't need to worry about it at the moment, but do keep an eye on it because Varroa mites can reproduce very quickly and then become a problem. So basically, at that time, they were fine and I didn't need to worry. Luckily, I was very pleased about that. My bees didn't have a bad case of Varroa destructor mites. But the mites aren't the only problem for bees getting through the winter. There's a chance that they starve because there's not as many flowers about in the winter, and if it's cold, the bees don't go out of their hive. So they basically need enough food inside, they need enough stores, and that is why I had been feeding them plenty of supplemented food to get them through, even if there weren't any flowers about. So the starvation thing, I had kind of covered. I hope that if I kept feeding them, then I wouldn't have that problem. Weather can be another thing that you need to think about because bees have to keep the inside of their hive nice and warm. I believe they have to keep the nest area at something like 35 degrees C, which is mad when you think about it. So even when it's like minus temperatures out here, they have to still keep that inside nest bit that warm. But they also don't deal with dampness very well.
Oh, look at it. It's soaking. Torrential rain. Hope my bees are okay. Just been worrying about them constantly. Oh, look at it, all damp and wet. It does make me worry. I really hope they're okay.
So to combat the damp and the cold, I decided to put some insulation inside the hive. I simply just cut a few sheets of, I think it's called Kingspan insulation. People would use it for housing and stuff like that. So I cut a few bits to shape and then placed them inside the hive, either side of the frames, so that I hope that it would just help trap in some of the heat and give them some extra warmth in case it got really cold. December came, the winter set in, and there was now not much I could do. Now, beekeeping is a spring, summer and autumn activity, and in the winter, because they have to keep the inside of the hive so warm, you can't really do much. You can't open up the hive in the middle of winter because it will let in all the cold air and let in the dampness, and that's really not good. So as a beekeeper, you have to just sit on your hands and wait and hope and cross your fingers that they're gonna be okay. And you just gotta put some faith and trust into your bees.
They're still in there. I knocked and then I could hear them all say, come in. Now, on a serious note, I heard them all start buzzing. When you knock on the side of the hive, they all like start buzzing.
Don't know why, but they do. It's the middle of winter and I'm very happy because my bees are still alive. There's an awful lot flying today and I think they're all flying about because it's so warm. It's about 15 degrees out here, 15 degrees C, which is ridiculous for the time of year. Recently we've had a lot of mild weather, but it's also been incredibly damp and wet. And that has worried me a little bit because one of the biggest causes of bee colony deaths in the winter months is because they get wet and they get damp on the inside of the hive. So I'm really hoping that my old wooden hive stays strong and stays waterproof. There's not a great deal you can do throughout the winter, but there's something which beekeepers practice called hefting. Now hefting is just the process of lifting up one side of the hive and just judging, making a guess on how much food stores they've got inside the hive. If it feels really heavy, it means that they've probably got plenty of food. If it's on the light side, then maybe they need some more. When I checked a few months ago, it was really heavy. Like I could hardly almost lift the hive off the ground. It's definitely a lot lighter than when I checked in like October time. There's still a little bit of weight there, so that I'm pretty sure there will be some stores, but I will give them some food to be certain that they have something to eat. It's interesting actually how you can notice the difference in weight just go down throughout the winter. You have to change the food that you give them. So in the summer and the autumn I was giving them like liquid, sugar and water mix. But in the winter, they stop taking that down. They won't take down that liquid feed and you have to feed them the fondant. So I'm gonna give them some of that today probably. And I haven't been stung yet since I started keeping these bees, so that's pretty cool. Maybe today will be the first day. There's a first for everything.
That is a block of the baker's fondant, so basically just pure sugar. And you can see that they've eaten away a hole there. And I think I'm going to cut a hole in that and then place a new block of that on top, like that, so they can eat their way through all of it and have plenty of food.
I'm going to cut a hole in that. Plonk that on top. And now they got double-decker food. It's like a sugar burger. And you may think it's kind of strange that like I've got bees and I'm just feeding them loads. You think that's like the opposite of what you're meant to do, which is them feed you with honey. But I need to give them plenty of supplemented food because they were such a small colony last year when I got them. Now, if I didn't feed them, the chances of them dying would be very high. So the first winter, this winter that we're currently going through, I need to feed them quite a lot to make sure they've got enough food. But then next winter, hopefully I won't need to feed them because they would have collected plenty of food throughout the summer and autumn. And then they'll be able to live on their own better. See what I mean? Where I am right now is my parents' house. And they live in a beautiful place with a nice garden. It's right next to the forest and countryside. And I was thinking recently about my living situation into the future because I've got to move out of the flat that I currently live in. I've got to move out of there in August because that's when my tenancy runs out. And I don't really know what I'm going to do next. I've got ideas that I might live in a different country for a bit. I might get a van, convert it and then travel around the world and do something like that. But then I also think that maybe I could do a deal with my mum and dad where they let me live in their house free of charge in return for me making honey for them, doing the beekeeping, and then also gardening and growing lots of vegetables and food that I can then cook up for them. So they're basically going to get a full-time gardener, chef and beekeeper in return for giving up just one bed and a bathroom. I'll have to check that with them. I haven't asked them about that yet, but mum and dad, if you're watching, maybe that could work. Let me know. Lots of possibilities, lots of exciting things could happen over the next year, so we'll see. Time will tell. Look at that, out here. I'm wearing a jumper, not a coat, and the sky is blue, and everything's nice and spring-like. The butterflies. Look at that. Oh. I feel like a reptile waking up from winter hibernation. It feels awesome. And I'm looking over at my beehive now and they're so active and they're bringing in loads of pollen and it's really exciting. And very, very soon we're going to open up the hive and do our first inspection of the year. I'm really excited about the next few months because in the beekeeping calendar, lots of things will happen. Firstly, we might have to deal with a swarming colony. This is basically where one beehive, one colony of bees reproduces and splits into two. And like I explained right at the beginning of the video, what I witnessed that day whilst walking was a swarming colony. Like I said, there were thousands of them. It was crazy, and I can't really imagine seeing that right here. But we might have to deal with that. And also, hopefully, I really hope that at some point this summer or autumn we get some honey harvest. And if that happens, then I will be a very happy person. Anyway, thanks for joining me along my beekeeping journey so far. Stay tuned for part 2, which will be coming at some point later on this year, where hopefully there'll be a lot more other exciting stuff to show you. Cheers for watching, and I'll see you soon.